when you go to a new place, you'll be surprised how many people first want you to leave with a good impression of their country. And then they kind of jump all over themselves to show you the best that their country has to offer. It's like, oh, it's your first time here? Well, you have to try this, you have to do that. They get excited to share with you their life and their culture.
Well, I am so excited today. As I mentioned in the intro, we have Jen Ruiz. She is the founder of Jen on a Jet Plane, and I am excited for our conversation today. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
So listen, one of the things that fascinates me is the entrepreneurial journey. And, it's amazing to see people who find their passion and find a way and become an entrepreneur. Some of them have it in their DNA, others don't. But I'd like we'll talk a lot about Jen on a Jet Plane and what you're doing today. But perhaps you could give our listeners a little idea of, who you are and what brought you to the point of being an entrepreneur or becoming an entrepreneur.
Well, I love the same, right? It's always really cool to see people chase after their passions and make a living out of what they really excel in. And for me, that was travel. I actually am a lawyer by training. I practiced law for 5 years until I took a 12 trips in 12 months challenge before my 30th birthday. And during that year, a lot of important shifts happened for me that allowed me to quit my job that following year and pursue this as a full-time career. I was able to make my first money online and see that that was a legitimate thing, right? Which now with remote work, we all know it. But back in 2017, it was still potentially sketchy. Is that something that's actually a viable method of making money? I was able to self-publish my very first book. I recently launched my first traditionally published book, which is a memoir, but I've self-published 5 books between 2018 and 2020 because I wanted to make passive income online. And that was one of the ways that I could do so. And I attended my first travel conference. So I learned about landing sponsored brand deals and about monetizing my website. So that year was really transformative for me and really served as a bridge to help me make that transition from law to being a full-time travel blogger, writer, author, and entrepreneur.
Amazing. So was this entrepreneurial bug something that your first generation, or was it something you saw, watch, learn from your parents or other mentors? How did that come about?
Funnily enough, my parents actually became entrepreneurs later in life in their 40s. They decided to risk their life savings and open up a childcare center because my mom had extensive experience as a career educator, principal, administrator for many years. And so it had always been her goal to open a school, but she didn't do so until late in life. So we both took risks, I feel like around maybe the same time. So it wasn't something I necessarily saw maybe a little bit. I think they did go in a little bit earlier than I did because they've had the franchise now for about over 10 years. And for me, it's been about 6 that I've been doing this full time. So I think it did help that they made that leap and I had that encouragement and seeing them as role models to like bet on yourself. And also, I never had parents that were saying, why would you quit law? That's crazy. Don't do that. Right. And I think a lot of people do encounter those walls that are maybe well meaning, but they come from the people we care a lot about and we value their opinion. And because of that, we hold ourselves back because other people are maybe scared for us to make that leap. So I was very lucky in that my parents supported me and they said that they had no idea what it is I did, but they knew if anybody could do it, it was me.
Right. Well, yeah, listen, you brought it up, so I'm going to go there. I think a lot of people listening are probably saying something similar, like, how do you go from being a lawyer, an attorney, right, to a TikToker as Jen on a jet plane? I mean, how does that transition take place? Was it simply, was there an issue with the law, or was it really this burning desire to be an entrepreneur? How do you make that transition? It seems like a much different, two different animals, so to speak.
It seems really different, but it's a lot of the same skill sets. Writing, public speaking, storytelling, those were all skill sets that I used as a trial attorney. But really, it started because I wanted a creative outlet. I think law is a field where you have a lot of monotony, a lot of forms, a lot of, day in and day out kind of work. And so my brain, being a creative brain, I wanted to have that challenge. So it started when I was pending bar clearance in Florida, and I was working as a law clerk while I was already barred as an attorney in Maryland. So I was doing kind of busy work, very much paperwork, busy work as a law clerk. And I got a thrill out of writing articles for Elite Daily and submitting them to Elite Daily and getting them published by the noon deadline for trending news articles. And even though at the time that wasn't something I was getting paid for, I had just launched my blog. I was trying to get into this, and I thought that, getting published in Elite Daily could get me eyeballs on the site if I had a link back. And it did. It did really well. That's how I got my first travel writing assignment. An editor found me from Pace Magazine and offered me to write for their travel vertical. At the time, I was an attorney. I didn't travel really. I had to work on Thanksgiving and
Mhm.
Christmas. But I then switched from private law to nonprofit law, and that helped me have more time to be able to travel and write about it. So, freelance travel writing was my introduction into this world. Then, self publishing was my introduction into making my own entrepreneurial endeavors pan out. And then, beyond that, monetizing my website, sponsored brand deals, building my social channels. All of that came when I had the time to dedicate full time.
Amazing. So you really made like a gradual progression out of law completely into this new venture, if you will.
Yes. So I started in 2014 and I quit in 2018. I started blogging in 2014, and it took me a long time to figure out, how do you monetize? What is, a viable method? I was really just figuring things out. And I think now, with
Sure.
the experience that I have, I could start and launch something and get to monetization much quicker. But it took me years. Even when I quit, I didn't really have anything aside from my self published income and a job teaching English online that I'd taken on the side during my 12 trips in 12 months challenge to fund all that travel. So I had kind of these I had proof of passive income, and I had a crutch in a remote job that I could do from anywhere. And that's when I was able to really dig into, okay, what do I need to know about SEO to monetize my website?
Sure.
How can I join the Mediavine Publisher Network, which I then joined in February of 2019, almost a year after I quit my job, to monetize my website. I continued publishing more books under the thought that a lot of six-figure authors have 20 books or more. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to self-publish 20 books. Here we go. Like, let's go there and see
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a great point though, because I think a lot of people think that if they want to do something else, that they just have to dive right
Yeah.
in head first and just go right into that. And we talk about it all the time that it doesn't have to be that way. If you find something you really love, start transitioning out of your current role. Use the extra time that you have. You created more time from going from corporate to nonprofit law to create more time to work on it. And you could gradually work your way out of that. So I think that's a very valuable lesson for a lot of our listeners who might be thinking of going in that, direction. So I got to ask you, so what really inspired you to, eventually quit the job and do the travel around the world, the 12 trips in 12 months? What was really the impetus around that?
Well, the 12 trips in 12 months challenge was done while I was employed full time. So I didn't quit my job to do that. I was taking
Okay.
trips all over the world. It ended up being 20 trips to 41 cities across 11 countries, all while being back in time for court at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. So I did have that extra leeway of bank holidays to work with now at a nonprofit. So I have President's Day off, like all these
Yep.
random days off that I didn't have before. And I did a lot of red eye flights. I did a lot of, short 3-day trips to a major metropolitan city where you can see a lot in a short time. Yeah. And so I just took advantage of that. And that was really because I wanted to see as much as possible before my 30th birthday. I think that we spend a lot of our life, trying to reach goals, working so hard to get to the next milestone. And we don't ever really take a time, like a Ferris Bueller time, to stop and smell the roses and see what's happening. And
Hmm.
it was very clear to me that that time was passing. And if I wanted to have that experience in my 20s, this was my last chance. So that year was really important in being able to have those experiences, learn about traveling on a budget, travel hacking, travel credit cards, budget airlines, all of those things. And it was a very transformative year that allowed me to see that that was something that I was looking forward to the most. You mentioned, making time for things and doing it maybe after work. And I would go home and I'd listen to podcasts. I'd learn about, self-publishing. I'd learn about blogging. I invested in a blogger conference that I attended in Huntsville, Alabama as one of the trips in that year. And so all of that made me realize that travel was where my passion was. It was what I was most excited about doing in my day, even when I was tired. And law was not that. Law was just something I was trying to get through to be able to do the travel stuff.
Yeah, and we're a big fan of experiences, and obviously travel provides a lot of experiences by just the mere, word of going out and experiencing a new location or a different culture, different food. So for our listeners, because I know a lot of them like to travel, what are your top two travel hacks for anybody that they could, go and use later today?
You definitely want to find affordable flights. And so I love signing up for flight alerts. I think that they're the easiest way for people who don't necessarily have a lot of experience, maybe don't want to track points and miles, have spreadsheets, all of that. It's just an easy way to find deals. And they're available for any type of deal you want, right? So I like Going or Thrifty Traveler, but there's also deals for business class flights. There's also flight alerts for point redemptions, Rome, Roame, that one's just for points. My friend Ashley from Ashley Gets Around, she has a list that's just for business class deals. And what's great about these alert programs is that you get the email, you see the price and you like it and you just click to book. It's so easy. And I get about a half dozen to a dozen alerts a day about flight deals. And so they're for all kinds of locations, all kinds of dates. They're not as restrictive as you might imagine. And they're just a really great way for you to stay on the pulse of what deals, what mistake fares, what's happening in the, airfare realm. So I would say that would be my number one tip. Sign up for one of those programs that I mentioned. Going does have free alerts that you can sign up for. Most of them do. They have like a trial program so you can see what they offer, or they send you like a percentage of the deals, like one in every four deals they'll send you on their free list. So
Right.
I encourage you to sign up so that and then you're like, oh, this is awesome. And you can find the program that works best for you, because there are many that offer this business model. And then I would also say, don't use your credit card without getting something back for it. And I know a lot of people like cash back or things like that, but I just think travel rewards are so much more valuable in so many cases because of how much these things cost, especially when you're redeeming these points for business class travel where they're thousands of dollars, for a single flight.
True.
So you could be getting points and miles for things like using your Lyft. You mentioned that you're going to be going to New York tomorrow. If you take a Lyft, you could be having Delta
Mhm.
miles by linking your Delta account,
I
you
do.
know?
I do. I got it linked up. My
Your
Starbucks gets
Starbucks,
Delta miles too.
your
Yeah.
Ticketmaster, a lot of people buying these $1,000
Mhm.
Taylor Swift tickets. Why are you not also getting 1,000 airline miles for this? And
Sure.
then also through shopping portals for your big purchases. So similar concept. I'm going to buy $1,000 MacBook from Apple. I can click through the Delta shopping portal, the JetBlue shopping portal, whoever is partnered with Apple at the time, and maybe get, let's say, 3,000 miles for my $1,000 purchase online because I clicked through them first. So purchases you're making with your credit card, you should be maximizing that for travel rewards.
Yeah, I think those are great points, and I think sometimes they get underutilized, and we forget about them. But they're definitely very valuable. So, how can I've heard you talk about this. How can people see some of their bucket list locations by using travel duping? Maybe you could explain what that is, and then kind of how that would work, so they could see some of those bucket list locations.
So, travel duping is when you find a location that has a lot to offer as a similar location that you want to visit, but maybe is closer and easier for you to access. And it maybe gets a bad rep with people saying that these destinations should stand on their own versus being compared to the big one. But I actually look at it differently. I look at it like, you didn't realize that this destination had all these same amazing things to offer and was so much closer. So, for instance, people who go all the way to the south of France, I love the south of France. It's incredible. And for people who can't get there, you have upstate New York that has a wine and cheese trail, that has lavender fields, that has art by French artists. You can have that French experience there in the summer for the people who can't afford peak season European travel, which is pretty hefty. Similarly, if you can't make it all the way to the Netherlands to see the tulip fields, we have tulip fields in Washington State and in Michigan that are beautiful, that are sourced from the same bulbs as the gardens in the Netherlands, that have fields and fields of endless flowers, and allow you that same photo picture perfect opportunity. So I just think that it's great to realize how many amazing things there are closer to home. And so many people think, oh, I'd love to experience this, but I have to go so far. It's why I love that we had the Northern Lights in North America recently, a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
because it kind of alerts people like, oh, wait, Northern Lights made it here. Oh, the eclipse. Like, people are seeing how cool these things are because it's kind of coming to them. But, ice caves, sand dunes, salt flats, we have all of those things here in the
Yeah.
US. So I do encourage you to not hesitate because you think that your trip has to be this grand across the world adventure. It's why my new book is called 12 Trips in 12 Months, not 12 Countries in 12 Months, because I really want to encourage people to capture the essence of travel, even in something as easy as a day trip, even in something like your own city, where, I live in Florida and a lot of people always say the beach is nearby, but they never go. So maybe you go and you actually plan
Right.
a beach day. Um,
Uh, I was going to say that exactly. I run into people, and I'm a victim of it too. I'm going to the Caribbean this summer for a few days, but at the same time, I could stay here on Long Island and go to almost just as beautiful beaches that I'm going to go to in the Caribbean here. So it's almost like I don't have to go very far to experience those. And I think times, like you said, I think that's a great tip that people think they have to go to these locations to have those experiences, and it's not necessarily the case.
yes.
So great point. On June 4th, you've mentioned you released 12 trips in 12 months. Make your own solo travel magic. What are your best solo magic tips?
So that phrase, solo travel magic, is really meant to capture how the world responds to you when you show up with a natural curiosity and an eagerness to learn. When you go to a new place, you'll be surprised how many people first want you to leave with a good impression of their country. And then they kind of jump all over themselves to show you the best that their country has to offer because it's like, oh, it's your first time here. Well, you have to try this, you have to do that. They get excited to share with you their life and their
Mhm.
culture. And so as somebody who travels solo, I've found that the magic of that is that, wait, and I don't think that there's any right way to travel or any superior way to travel. I think that there are pros to be found in every way that you travel, with family, with a loved one, with an intergenerational travel. Like, I think they're all amazing. But for me, the pro of solo travel is that you don't have somebody with you who speaks your language, who's like your safety blanket of sorts, who debriefs with you after every experience. You're by yourself. And so you don't have any other choice but to talk to everybody that you meet because you're not talking in English to the person that you came with. Like, if you were to sit in the back of a taxi with somebody, you'd be talking to that person the whole taxi ride. If you sit by yourself, eventually you're going to ask the driver, like, so what's good
Mhm.
around here? Where should I go to eat? What's your favorite
Right.
place? So you make more of these local connections. And for me, solo travel magic has happened in so many forms. In the book, I had a moment where I had an opera that they changed the programming and dedicated a song to me, just by virtue of me having shown up early and asked questions and gotten to know the cast beforehand. So that was a special surprise that I had. And I find that if you go somewhere and you're really open and you want to learn and you're being friendly and you make an effort to learn some words in the local language, and you just put out that energy of curiosity, that people are going to really reward you with so many wonderful experiences that you didn't even expect.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I can see how that works. And I would add to to what you said. I think there's pros and cons to everything, right? And to your point, no matter how you travel, there are pros to that way, and there are cons as well. So Here, here. So, how did you end up turning your travel experiences into a TED Talk? Because I think a lot of our listeners, are familiar with TED Talks. They've seen them. A lot of folks that I run into, if they haven't done one, would like to do one. So, how did you go about turning your travel experiences into one?
Well, a TED Talk was a big goal for me when I quit my job because going from law to travel blogging, you kind of lose the instant credibility. I missed when I would introduce myself to people and I would say I'm a lawyer and I'd get the instant deference, like, oh, uh, and now I say I'm a travel blogger and they're like, oh. It's a whole different reaction. And so
Pros and cons. We were talking about that just a second ago, right?
Exactly. And so I thought a TEDx talk would help me have that instant legitimacy, right? Where people understood what it is that I do. And so it was a big goal for me immediately when I quit my job. And I did everything I could, again, researched to learn more the same way I had gone to the library when I started my challenge and took out every book I could about traveling on a budget, traveling the world, all that stuff. I went to the library and I took out every book I could on public speaking, TED Talks, the TED Talk book by Chris Anderson. And I learned everything about pitching. I learned how this works. I learned that it's a talk that is more about the idea than you and your biography, and your credentials. It's really more about having the seed that's going to spread in the mind of the people. And so you really want to lead with that and have that be your anchor. So I was able to and they have the list of all the events, the TED events on TED, the site. So you just have to go through and it takes some time to mine it and see, because every independently organized TEDx event, it's different than the big TED events. The TEDx events are
Right.
affiliated with TED and they have to meet standards that TED has, but they're independently organized. So they drastically vary in terms of the website they may have set up, their application process, the team that they have working on it, the audio visuals that they have. That's a big one too. When you're applying, you kind of want to see what are some other people that have done this and what does the AV look like. My first TEDx talk had an amazing AV team that came out like crystal clear, great quality, and has been with me, for so many years since then, that images and the photography and the videos that were taken that day. So just stuff to consider. And then I went through and I applied with my idea wherever possible, mentioning local ties, but not letting that hinder me either. Because I think people are like, okay, I live in Denver. I can only apply to TEDx Mile High Denver, and then you don't get in because it's a competitive one and then you don't apply anywhere else. So I think there is a numbers game in terms of pitching yourself, which I know from being a writer, where if you want an article placed, you may have to pitch 50 to 100 places before you have one that says yes. So I pitched a lot of different places for the TEDx talk, and then eventually I landed it. I also landed two more after that. So I've given three TEDx talks total, one of them remotely during the pandemic.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, congratulations on those. I'm sure there'll be more to come at some point. I'm sure. As you've grown your social presence, you've secured brand partnerships. What advice do you have for those that are seeking to do the same and try to connect and get brand sponsorships? What advice do you have for them?
I do think that the secret sauce is meeting brand partners offline. So I do think that there is something to be said for pitching and just having, again, the numbers game and getting things out there. But it is so much easier to make those connections face to face and now have the brand know who you are versus you just being another bulk query in their submission inbox, right? Another person trying to ask for something from them. So I thought that going to travel conferences is the best way to make those warm leads. And I go to several travel conferences a year. There's a ton of them. The Women in Travel Summit, Women's Travel Fest, TBEX, Traverse, Latino Travel Fest. Like there's so many, Nomadness. Like there's so many travel conferences, TravelCon that's now run by FinCon. The same people run them. And so these are
Hmm.
great ways that you can go and actually meet with brands. And I just think it takes you out of being that bulk person in an email inbox where they get everybody pitching them the same thing to being someone that they now know. Same way where if you were to get an interview
That's what I was thinking of as you were saying that, right? Way to stand out rather than just sending your resume in, you wanna stand out from that crowd. So what you're suggesting is meeting these folks in person is really the way to do that. So they know you. They can immediately decide probably within minutes whether or not you align with what they're trying to accomplish with their brand. And now it's a face, a voice to the name rather than just a piece of paper that says you yada yada yada.
Exactly. Exactly. So my first both hosted and um, well, not my first hosted, but one of my first hosted hotel stays and my first paid gigs. Both of them I got through conferences. And for the hosted hotel that I had, it was with Margaritaville Resorts, and they actually were a big brand for me to work with at the time. And I didn't have that many followers. And they mentioned, it's because we like you, we like hearing your story. So it was something where even despite not having the numbers that you would think that you'd need, having that personal connection can really be more of an important factor.
Sure, and they're like a sponsor now of your success because they're giving you exposure too, which I'm sure helped grow that exposure as well. It's mutually beneficial.
Absolutely. Yes, I've been very grateful to have some
Yeah.
wonderful brand partners.
Yeah. So listen, I've read that only 7% of traditionally published authors are Hispanic. How do you think we increase that number? Because I was kind of shocked that it was that low. What are your thoughts on that?
It is really interesting because it's a similar shocking numbers that you'll see in terms of brands that invest in a Hispanic audience and brands that are invested in Hispanic Heritage Month. Like we see that kind of lack of investment that should correlate with the interest in the numbers in terms of the Hispanic people that we have in the US, because we
Sure.
are,
Yeah.
the largest minority and we make a lot of purchases. We have a lot of purchasing power, but it's not for some reason seen or invested in. And it's very frustrating, to see Hispanic creative projects that get pushed for a season and then canceled, or just for whatever reason. It is really frustrating, and I think that we still have a long ways to go with that, and then the AAPI community as well. Like I think that we just have a ways to go. I think that we underestimate the purchasing power and we still see the money directed towards other areas, and I think a lot of that maybe comes from making your own tables instead of waiting for a space in them. And I think that we've seen different communities do that, like with Tyler Perry making his own network and making his own movies and things like that. And there are some people in the Hispanic community that are doing that. America Ferrera, um, Eva, not Eva Mendez, Eva, yeah, Eva
Longoria?
Longoria. She has
Longoria?
a production company. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know why I blanked on the Evas because I had her clearly in
That's
my head. And she's
okay.
fabulous and I love her. And so she's doing great things and she's trying to push those Hispanic stories. So I think we need more people that are in those positions of power that are maybe just making the shows themselves and funding the shows themselves and, commissioning the books themselves. I think shows, because books and TV shows usually correlate. And that's when a book really blows up, is when it gets a show made about it. And we've seen that. I think about, actually, Eva Longoria's company produced the Gordita Chronicles that was on HBO, and it did a first season and it was amazing. And I believe it was based on a book. And yeah, and then it didn't get renewed for another season, and now it's on Hulu, which is good because it has a new audience. But we just want to see, I think, more of those stories told, and I think it starts with telling them ourselves, and getting more
Mhm,
people to be able to get to that level where they have the discretionary income to be able to invest in these projects. And we're doing well, right? We're definitely getting people up in that stage. And so it's just, I think, a matter of doing it more and then supporting those projects when they do come out. So like my friend Janice Torres, she just released Financially Lit. And that's a great book because it's specifically targeted for Latinas in the financial space. And I think it's a book that fills a need. And so it's important to come out and support each other and promote each other.
mhm.
And so I hope that we see more of that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's so important. I think you're right. Listen, I think things are better than they were, 5 and 10 years ago. But we always want things to happen more quickly than they are, and sometimes it's we have to take pride in where we were to where we are, just as much as how quickly we want to get to the next step. So thank you, and thank you for sharing your story because I'm sure it's adding and helping elevate the Latina, Hispanic community. So thank you for that.
Excellent.
So listen, Jen, we're all about joy on this show, and I get a lot of joy out of traveling. So this is awesome having this conversation and learning about your journey. But we ask each of our guests the same final question, which is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
I love starting my morning with an audiobook. And I vary it depending on what I want my mood for the day to be. So if I want to be productive, I'll start with a business minded audiobook. If I want to be at peace, I'll start with like a self help or like a manifestation, inner wellness audiobook. But either way, I a long time ago shifted from watching the news in the morning to purposely inputting really productive, useful, positive information into my brain first thing in the morning, versus like panic, world alerts. These are all the horrible things that are happening.
Yes.
It makes a big difference. And so for me, I listened today. Today was a Monday, so it was a productive day. I listened to a new Gary Vee book about day trading attention, which is really a really great deep dive into social media. It's definitely intense, but I think it just helps you to keep leveling up, right? I think you never stop learning, especially as an entrepreneur. It's one of the best parts of this profession. And yeah, I think that always fills me with joy.
That sounds like a great way to start the day. Now, do you listen to the whole book, or do you use one of those systems where it's a shortened version and you get all the key points? What do you use for that?
I do listen to the whole book, but I'll split it up over, multiple days. So I'll maybe listen to a half
Right.
hour to an hour every morning. And the books will be like maybe 7 hours or so. So yeah, and I'll vary it up. Last week was Rachel Rogers. She just released a new money workbook to accompany her We Should All Be Millionaires book. That was a great read. So I just always pick something different, and I think it gives me something to look forward to, and I feel like I'm always learning and filling my brain with good, useful things.
Yeah, better than listening to the news or watching the news, however you want to consume that, for sure. So, listen, Jen, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we're going to have all your information in the show notes. But if people want to learn more about you, want to connect with you, want to have access or get access to the book, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
And I don't want to bash the news because I feel like we're both on the news. So like we want people to watch us, but like maybe in the afternoon after you've had your Zen morning. Um,
Yes, yes. Have a little bit of filtration on it, right?
yes,
Not all the bad
yes, because
stuff.
I know
We have a tendency to talk about the good stuff, though.
exactly.
You want to watch us. You want to watch us,
Exactly,
you know?
exactly. Just want to recover that because
Yeah,
I know you have an upcoming appearance, so I want people to tune in.
yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah, so you can
yeah.
find me at Jen on a Jet Plane across all social media channels: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, jenonajetplane.com. And you can also find my new book, 12 Trips in 12 Months.com, or on Instagram at 12 Trips in 12 Months.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Jen. It's been a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your
Thank
day.
you. You too, Larry.